Hazardous Waste, Bad for Indigenous Ways of Life by Robert Whitholm. Hazardous waste. What exactly is it? Hazardous waste is waste that poses substantial or potential threats to public health or the environment. Hazardous waste can affect people and other living organisms in a variety of ways. Some of these ways are water, soil, sediment or dust, air, or even food. Water can be affected by even swimming or showering in an affected area through direct skin contact, or also drinking contaminated groundwater or surface water. With soil, sediment, or dust, you can inhale it or it can come in direct contact with your skin. And air, if you inhale hazardous chemical vapors, then that can cause some health effects too. With food, if you eat hazardous chemical food that contains hazardous chemicals, that can affect you. But also eating contaminated fish can also affect you. Hazardous waste, dangerous effects. Hazardous waste that has negatively affected Alaskans. Methylmercury is one. Methylmercury is highly poisonous and is contained in various types of fish and shellfish found in the ocean and fresh water. The toxicity varies according to its form, amount of exposure, and individual susceptibility. But when a pregnant woman is exposed to methylmercury, it may increase the risk of silent birth and the birth of babies with deformities or severe nervous system diseases, even when the mother does not show any symptoms of poisoning. Next is biohazard or nuclear dump sites. Some of these health causes can cause various types of cancer, contaminates environments, and causes animals to contain potentially dangerous levels of radioactivity. So let's talk more specifically about methylmercury. What can contain methylmercury? Fish and shellfish can contain methylmercury. And is it safe? Safe amounts of methylmercury intake controlled by the state of Alaska and FDA. Food and Drug Administration. Assessing health risk in the state of Alaska, the FDA say that people should eat less portions of species containing methylmercury versus what the state of Alaska recommends regarding the safe amount of methylmercury the body can ingest. So what these conflicting numbers may mean for consumers are that they changed the definition of an adult size meal from 8 ounces to 6 ounces, and it was agreed that the fish advisory would not apply to commercially harvested fish from Alaskan waters. In their final advisory and health bulletin, the Alaska Department of Public Health concluded that Alaskans will improve their health by eating more wild Alaska seafood, and sensitive populations should modify their consumption patterns slightly. The state recommends that vulnerable populations should limit consumption to 1 or 2 meals per week of 5 species of Alaskan fish, which are shark, yellow eye rockfish, spiny dogfish, lingcod, and halibut, but may safely eat unlimited quantities of other species such as salmon, trout, and pike. This recommendation is based on calculations of an acceptable daily intake level that exceed the EPA by fourfold. Hazardous waste in Point Hope, Alaska. Point Hope is located far away from any connection to civilization, and what happened in this small village was something that everyone there described as odd. People were dying from cancer at abnormally higher rates since the 1960s, but with no definitive answer why. Upon learning of the military's presence around Point Hope and what the kind of toxic chemicals was spilt, left, or buried there, people started to wonder. Any possible wrongdoing by the United States government was quickly turned away from any potential wrongdoing by shifting the blame away from them and onto the, quote, people's bad lifestyle in the village of Point Hope. And when this news was brought back to Point Hope, there was a lot of people that were suffered from depression, and a lot of people talked about how the village used to be very proud and upbeat, and it was very clean. And after this news had hit, the village started to become dirty. There was garbage being strewn around. So, what was purported to be the cause of an unhealthy lifestyle was actually proved through a long chain of events that proved the wrongdoing of multiple agencies within the American government to properly dispose of the toxic waste that was left. So moving on to another hazardous waste in Alaska, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, cause and effect. The cause was an oil tanker, oil spilling everywhere. The oil spill caused a lot of problems for Alaska and their way of life. When the spill happened, the corporate elite of Exxon Valdez were quick to blame the captain of the tanker, and also the first to declare that the wildlife of the Prince William Sound had recovered, which was later proven to be false. So this is what makes it to the mainstream media before anyone else involved or affected by the spill, like the poor, working class, and marginalized racial and ethnic groups who stood to lose their winter food supplies and livelihood due to the shutdown of hunting and fishing in areas that were contaminated. So let's take a look here at the Exxon Valdez oil spill. So this is 25 years later. Now remember what I said earlier about how Exxon Valdez had claimed that the Prince William Sound excuse me, what had recovered its population, and it shows a timeline of the various species that have recovered throughout the years since the time of the oil spill in 1989. And you can see that there are some species that are not recovering, and some that they don't know, and some that are still recovering, and this is up to the year 2014. So next I want to talk to you about the Sami people, the indigenous people of Northern Europe. In the very northern part of Europe, the Sami are indigenous natives who have inhabited countries like Finland, Norway, Russia, and Sweden for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Today, the Sami people face an uphill battle. According to the United Nations Regional Information Center for Western Europe, the Sami people are heavily discriminated against, and their language is at a high risk for being lost. There are several different Sami dialects, and of which 3 were spoken in Norway, are lost. 2 are at high risk of becoming extinct, and the last is also listed as a high risk of becoming extinct. The Sami people have also had to fight to get some of their native lands back, and particularly in Finland. The fight to gain control of their native lands is not going well. In fact, the native Sami aren't even given adequate caring, and the care that they do get is deemed as not enough. Finland in particular owns 90% of the Sami native lands with little hope to regain it back. The European Council even went so far as to say that Finland has handled minority groups such as the Sami poorly. In contrast, Norway had actually made steps towards helping the Sami by voting in a protection of land rights to indigenous and tribal peoples, but is not interpreted as such in the fine print. It seems that there was a different interpretation of ownership, and possession was misconstrued as protected right to use, and was actually the verbiage intended, which meant that the land and water in question was only for the Sami to use, and gave that land to the current inhabitants of that pre-existing county. And the biggest fear for the Sami is that they will no longer be able to live their traditional lifestyle and be forced to assimilate into the Finnish or Norwegian population. If the assimilation of the Sami is forced upon them, that means that the traditional ways of knowing and other ancient practices such as reindeer herding will be in danger of being lost. So what's the importance of reindeer to the Sami and the people of Norway? In Norway, reindeer meat is a huge part of their diet, and the way that the Sami people benefit from that is by selling the reindeer meat. And they sell about for one reindeer, it's about $400 a piece. And what caused radiation to affect the reindeer herds? So think back to 1986 when the nuclear power plant Chernobyl erupted, sending radioactive material throughout parts of Europe. When that occurred, it sent radioactive material flying into the atmosphere, and it went as far away as Norway and fell to the ground, being absorbed by plants that the reindeer feed on, and transversely has affected entire ecosystems. And the diet that reindeer have is from mushrooms, mosses, and lichens, and these particular plants really absorb that radioactive material. And how does that affect the Sami? Well, the Sami have to have their reindeer tested for contamination, and if the reindeer test higher than the allowable contamination limit, then they cannot sell that reindeer, and it has to be released from the herd and cannot be harvested. So what is Norway's risk assessment for the reindeer meat that they intend to consume? So for reindeer meat to be considered contaminated within Norway, their recommendation is 3,000 becquerels per kilogram, and a becquerel is a unit of measure to measure radiation. And this is compared to the European Union, which says that the safe amount to ingest is 600 becquerels. And that's about Norway has about 5 times the amount that the European Union considers safe to ingest. And what's interesting about this is the striking resemblance that Norway's risk assessment of this problem has with the state of Alaska and their methylmercury problem that is contained in fish. So are hazardous materials beneficial to wildlife populations in areas that have been affected by nuclear fallouts and areas like that? The answer is yes. So there have been some benefits to places that have been abandoned due to the high concentrations of radioactivity. In this respect, it refers to living organisms other than humans who inhabit the area. Once all human activity had ceased and been abandoned in Chernobyl as well as Fukushima, Japan, which were left abandoned after nuclear power plant meltdowns, animal populations skyrocketed. In Chernobyl, the elk, wolves, bear, and lynx populations increased dramatically due to the lack of human activity or people being around to hunt them. The same can be said in Fukushima, Japan. Wild pigs have thrived since the earthquake that caused the nuclear power plant meltdown, which forced its people to leave the area entirely. Since there is no one to hunt these pigs, they run rampant, breeding and feeding on local crops with little to no resistance from people. If there's one thing that can be gathered from this presentation, it's that hazardous materials are a problem not only in Alaska but worldwide, and it affects indigenous people, it affects all people, from the power plants where it can start, or where hazardous chemicals are and can be spilled and be put into the ecosystem. It can cause huge problems and ramifications that some of what I have displayed has shown the problems that have occurred. So I hope you liked my presentation, and it was a great class. Thank you for watching.